Hollywood portrayed William Wallace as Braveheart, a man born to fight. But he had another past. His family had intended that he would join an order of monks under the protection of the Pope. When he left his childhood farm, the way ahead must have seemed clear. Yet his life would follow a violent path he could never have imagined. By investigating this journey, we can uncover a window into Braveheart's lost world, and it revolutionizes our view of medieval Scotland. The journey takes us just a few miles from his childhood home to Paisley Abbey. Much of the Abbey's centuries-old stonework can still be seen. In Wallace's time, this was part of a Cluniac monastery, and the Cluniac order had a reputation for wealth and splendor. Their buildings were famed for their magnificence.
The Abbey at Paisley here, it's founded by the Stuart family back in the 12th century. And the Stuarts are the patrons of the Wallace family. So it's a kind of place that Wallace and his family generally would have been quite familiar with.
Wallace's education would have been funded by his lord, the head of the Stuart clan. It's likely that it would have been here at Paisley, and that Wallace would have become part of the monastic order.
The lifestyle there is very, very much that of the monastic regime. It means getting up before dawn in the morning, services in the church, but they would also have a fairly heavily regulated routine of lessons. They'd have to be trained in scripture, they'd have to be trained in theology, and just generally getting the all-round education of a literate person in the Middle Ages.
Back in the 13th century, Paisley Abbey was a wealthy and influential place, its monks answerable only to the Pope in Rome. The abbey stood at the center of a large monastery. With cloisters attached, it was surrounded by a great complex of buildings. There were barns, stables, and storehouses. They were ringed by a precinct wall. But the monks didn't live in isolation. Beneath this building, an elaborate sewage system has been discovered. Research has revealed that it serviced all of the major buildings. All the waste of everyday life flowed through here. The sewer demonstrates this place had extraordinary connections with the outside world. It provides evidence of a sophisticated society that has been hidden for 500 years.
Originally, we would have had a stream of water running through it to flush the drains from the latrines up in the abbey.
When the drains were first reopened, they were blocked with around 550 years of compacted silt. Over the course of a few weeks, this silt was pumped out. A team of archaeologists spent 3 months sieving through it. They discovered hundreds of artifacts, from belt buckles to tuning pegs.
So here we've got one only slightly used chamber pot. It survived complete, having been dropped down there by a monk in the middle of the night, probably. They're also collecting human urine because they use it for a variety of things. It's used, for example, as a cleanser, believe it or not, and a disinfectant for clothing.
Evidence here even reveals what Wallace heard when he came to the monastery. This is handwritten notation of the choir's music.
It's a piece of multi-part music. In fact, it's the earliest known surviving piece of multi-part music in Scotland. It's for 3 voices. And I think what's really most interesting about this, most wonderful about this is the genuine voice of the medieval monastic choir.
These lead seals once secured bales of cloth brought from mainland Europe. It's proof that medieval Scotland was no isolated backwater. The remains of spices and plants suggest access to international trade routes.
This is where evidence for the connections with the wider world, far beyond even Europe, some of these things coming from the Near East, some of them coming from Indonesia and places such as that.
All the silt and artifacts have now been pumped out, but experts are still astonished by what has been left behind. The drain itself, Protected from the elements for 5 centuries, it's a beautifully preserved piece of engineering history.
This is high quality stonework, first class engineering.
The designs were carried out by master masons, the elite of the construction industry.
Now, the quality of each individual block here, this is the craftsmanship of individual masons. And just to show you who did it, they put their own marks onto the stones so that they would be paid for the pieces of work that they had actually done.
Hollywood's portrayal of medieval Scotland was as a primitive, savage place. But from what investigators have discovered here in the sewer, we know Braveheart lived in a rich culture.
The material from the drain is fantastic. It's just completely revolutionised our whole way of looking at aspects of medieval life in Scotland.
In medieval Scotland, the church was a powerful force,